Entitled Stepniece Tried to Hijack My Mother's Funeral. My sister's stepdaughter crossed an unforgivable line at my mother's funeral. Not only did she sneak in her own mother's urn, but she then gave a eulogy about her own mother at a ceremony that was supposed to be honoring mine. You could argue that my sister and her husband enabled this, but I just know that little girl knew what she was doing. Now I'm worried she's about to do it again. My grandmother just passed away. We are in the middle of planning her funeral, and I really only have one request. One particular person, we'll call her Shannon, needs to be banned from it. This sounds bad, but hear me out. Shannon is my sister's stepdaughter. When Shannon was 12, her mother passed away a little under 2 months before mine and my sister's mother. Shannon's father couldn't allow her to go to her mother's funeral because our own mother was severely ill. They had 2 very young kids, so they would have had to allow her to fly cross-country alone and then risk a kidnapping from the extended relatives. She was obviously very hurt by this, and their solution was to, unbeknownst to anyone else, make her think that my mother's funeral was about her own mother as well. At my mother's funeral, we were blindsided by pictures for not only my mother, but also my niece's mother as well. They'd also gotten a hold of the urn and had that prominently on display. They basically turned it into a joint funeral, and my niece played it up 100%. She acted like she was the primary mourner and gave a full 5-minute eulogy to just her mother. It was ridiculously inappropriate, and turned what should have been a nice memorial into a drama-filled sideshow. My mother and Shannon's mother had never met, so we had to tell the full story of my sister's husband's first marriage, when it should have been just about my mother's life. I'm not willing to risk any of that again for my grandmother's funeral, so I want her banned. Yes, it was wrong of the adults to enable it to happen, but she had to have known better. I could even forgive it if she had ever in the last 10 years apologized at all, but she defends it and acts like she deserved to do it because her father and stepmom, my sister, didn't let her go to her mother's funeral. Yes, it's not good that they didn't, but unfortunately things happen, and it doesn't give you a free pass to just do whatever you want to do. Word has spread, and relatives that aren't even my sister and her husband are mad at me over this. They think I need to just let it go, and I can't just ban family from a funeral, especially over something they did over a decade ago. Am I really that wrong to still be angry over this? There are a few issues with this original poster's story right off the bat. The first and most important is that her story changed in the comments. While the story claims that Shannon's dad and stepmom were responsible for Shannon's behavior, OP backpedals in the comments and claims that Shannon was acting on her own, and that she even snuck the urn in without anybody noticing. If this is true, the girl who pulled that off at 12 is probably the leader of a heist ring by now, and should definitely be excluded from future family events. The other important detail is that regardless of who you blame, Shannon did this because she was denied her mother's funeral. It is highly unlikely that she's going to eulogize the same woman 10 years later at a completely different funerary service. So even if OP doesn't want to forgive Shannon, trying to ban her from the funeral is just extra. Most people do stupider things when they're 12 than they do in their 20s. They do plenty of stupid things in their 20s as well, but few of them involve smuggling ashes from a funeral they didn't even attend into a funeral for someone else's mother. Also, what was that about Shannon being kidnapped? Are we just going to gloss over that? It's always frustrating when the best parts of a story happen off-screen. Anyway, feel free to share your thoughts below on whether OP's a jerk for holding this grudge 10 years later, and how you think a 12-year-old might smuggle an urn into a funeral without her parents noticing. My whipped friends let their girlfriends ruin guys' night. I recently moved back on campus with all of my close friend group, and to celebrate, we decided to have a guys' night at one of our places. The plan was for it to be solely a guys' night, since we all haven't seen each other in person since May. All of them have girlfriends they had seen throughout the summer, so we stocked up on beer, food, video games, and all the other stuff we needed for the night. The evening of the event, we hung out for a good 30 minutes before the girlfriend of one of the friends whose apartment we were at came over. She said that she had forgotten something earlier that day, but once she saw we were having fun, she decided to join in. After she showed up, the other guys started inviting their girls, and they trickled in. After that point, the night had changed. It was no longer a guys' night. It was 4 couples and me hanging out. I tried to put up with it and have fun, but I couldn't. I could tell all of my friends were more interested in talking to their girlfriends and about couple stuff than they were about anything else. We played a drinking game that was set up into teams of couples and me alone, and after everyone was drunk, it got worse. Some couples were more affectionate, and one started making out. I took that as my cue to leave. So I just kind of got up, moved by the door, and when no one was paying attention, I slipped out the door and went. Another 20 minutes go by, and I get a text asking where I am. I told them I wasn't feeling the night, and told them to have fun. Then, yesterday morning, I got a bunch of texts in the group chat saying that I pulled a jerk move. They said that I made their girlfriends feel unwelcome, and like I didn't like them. It's not that I don't like their girlfriends. The guys just change so much around them, and they act all whipped and lame. It was supposed to be a guy's night, not a let's sit around and tongue our hose night. Am I the jerk for leaving a guy's night after my friend's girlfriend surprised us? Before I even pass judgment, there's a detail about this story you'll want to know. Normally, a story this straightforward wouldn't be second in the video, but this one is special for its behind-the-scenes details. In the original post, OP didn't call these women hoes. He actually stealth-edited that in after commenters had told him he wasn't the jerk. Apparently, he was actually worried that we might not think he was a misogynist. So he's definitely the jerk. Not the whole way through, though, mind you. I'd love to know what game they were playing that they put the single guy alone instead of letting him be on a team of 3. And one girl showing up is one thing, but the rest of the guys going out of their way to tank their guys' night together is pretty low. That said, this troll seems to be offended at the idea that any guy would rather make out with a woman than play video games with his buddies. And he's a jerk for the way he voices that in this rage bait. You should never blow off set plans with friends just to get some, but accepting that people in relationships don't always have time for you is a part of life. He's not a jerk for this one night that may or may not have really happened, but he's a jerk for refusing to accept that his buddies are in relationships when he's not. And they won't be his buddies for long if he doesn't get over that. If you made it this far in the video, consider liking and subscribing for more videos coming. My son has 2 daddies, and it's all my wife's fault. My relationship with my wife, Sam, has been rocky since our son Oliver was born 2 years ago. She got pregnant just a few months after we got married, and things were fine up until Oliver's delivery. I assume it was postpartum depression. Sam never sought out a specific diagnosis, but after he was born, it was like she just couldn't care less about our child. We hadn't planned on having children so early in our marriage, and it was scary. But I can't describe to you the all-encompassing love that comes with being a parent. The fear was worth it for me. It still is, and always will be. Throughout Oliver's life, but especially that first year, I was essentially acting as a single parent. The only help I had, and I don't mean for that to sound diminishing, because this man is a godsend, was my best friend Matt. The plan was for Oliver to be breastfed, but my wife had no interest in it after he was born. I was the one changing diapers and mixing up formula for bottles. Being in the house we shared felt so oppressive, like the joys of bonding with my son were being sucked out of me because of the energy there. So I would take Oliver to Matt's. I don't want to ramble on for too long, but there have been exactly 0 times in life when Matt hasn't shown up for me. I've known him since I was 19 and can safely say this even after all that time. But this is the most wonderful thing he's given me. I could sleep soundly, knowing my baby would be taken care of. I had a place of refuge. He is so good with Oliver and is my shoulder to cry on. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay him, but I'm definitely trying every single day. Things with my wife have kind of started to look up, but recent events have sent us into a huge downward spiral. Oliver was having some speech delays, but he's been really picking things up as his 3rd birthday nears. He's babbled dada towards Matt and I for a while now, but daddy has since been added to his vocabulary, and that is used to refer to us both. I've never corrected him. I checked it with Matt to make sure he was fine, and he said he was honored to be bestowed with such a title. Sam got to hear this recently when I was on FaceTime with Matt, and she basically went ballistic. As much as I hate to admit it, I did say he was more of a parent than she had been, which, while true, is hurtful. I need outside opinions on this. Am I the jerk for allowing Oliver to call Matt Dad? Update. I came home Thursday with a plan to talk to my wife. I texted her in advance, so I was able to jump right in when I arrived. I told her I was feeling exhausted and worn down. I said frustration had built up with her being so uninvolved. I said I wanted to see real, major change in the way she interacts with Oliver within the next 2 months, or an ultimatum would be given of her getting help or a divorce. I also made it clear that if she wanted to get help now and not wait those 2 months, that was also acceptable. I would assist her however she wanted, but I wanted to see some initiative being taken for our child. At first, I was met with anger. Eventually, we were able to have a genuine conversation where she admitted that she didn't feel maternal at all. She felt I had pushed her too hard to have Oliver when she got pregnant, and she often wonders what our life would be like if she had made a different choice. Obviously, this was all hard for me to hear. Resentment was building up on both sides, but did it have to build for nearly 3 years? I can't help but feel like it was mostly her responsibility to bring up this conversation. My frustration was over her treatment of our son. Her frustration was over us having a son at all. I can't even fathom a world without Oliver in it, while she was pondering what our life looks like if he never existed. It's been a few days since that conversation, and I'm still feeling a lot. I feel sad for her. I'm very angry for my son and I, that the last 3 years could have looked different and saved us from so much pain and exhaustion and negative emotion. It doesn't feel fair. She and I are going to start the divorce process soon. I'm hoping that it will remain civil. I called my parents to update them on the situation. They've been unconditionally supportive of me, and we're ready to jump into action mode to help. They will financially support us for the time being and offered us a place to stay. Matt and I discussed it, and we don't think that's a viable option. Oliver is already going through a big life change, so taking him out of state to a house he's unfamiliar with would be harmful. It would also complicate things during the divorce. We're moving in with Matt. On top of all the practical reasons why it makes sense, Matt expressed that he would hate for us to be so far from him and that anywhere he is would always be a home for Oliver and I. We still have a lot of things to pack, but we've been here since that conversation. Oliver was already used to life here, so the transition has been smooth. I have a lot of emotions to work through and plan on starting therapy soon. Edit. The mentions of coercion and force are ridiculous. Sam has never said outright that she didn't want a child. In fact, we had conversations prior to marriage about starting a family together. It was just never planned that it would happen so early into our marriage. She was scared about having him so early, and I did my best to assuage those fears by reassuring her, but always giving the option for her to have an out should she want it. There was never the expectation put upon her that she needed to have the baby. That edit is troublesome, so I'm largely ignoring it. It's such a subjective detail whether he pressured her into having a baby or not. She says that she felt pressured, and I just can't take OP's word that she wasn't for no other reason than the fact that he's the one who wrote the post. Of course, he's going to write himself as the hero of his own story. What I will focus on is OP's assertion that it was Sam's responsibility to have the conversation that led to their divorce. That's out of line. On one hand, he's not entirely wrong, but you don't get to point fingers and assign blame for whose job it is to bring up issues in a marriage. His own post suggests that he had problems with his wife for 3 years, and he deliberately ignored it while running off to cuddle some dude. He had just as much power to bring it up as she did, and if he really thought she was struggling with postpartum depression, remaining silent was borderline cruel and reckless. He's not the jerk for allowing the kid to call Matt dad when that's what Matt was acting like. At the same time, he's a total jerk for fostering that relationship while doing literally nothing to examine the issues with Oliver's mom. Honestly, it kind of sounds like the outcome he got was the one he wanted from the very beginning. But maybe you have a different perspective. It's a complicated issue, so give us your own 2 cents on whether OP is a jerk and why or why not. Controlling stepdad stole my wedding dress and gave it to his own daughter. I'm 16 and grew up without a father. For a long time, it was just me and my mom. Last year, my mom got married to my stepdad, Brad. He has 2 kids, 18-year-old Jake and 26-year-old Tessa. My dad passed away shortly after I was born, leaving my mom in mountains of debt. The one thing she refused to sell was her wedding dress. She always talked about how it was her dream for me to get married wearing her dress, or at least her veil. It's a gorgeous, simple white dress with a long lace veil. My dad had the dress handmade and designed for my mom before their wedding. When my mom remarried, she still refused to sell the dress and got a new dress for her wedding to Brad. She always talks about that dress being mine. Tessa got engaged last week. She was so excited to show off her ring and talk about her wedding plans. Tessa knows how much the dress means to me, so while talking about her wedding with my mom and Brad, she threw out the idea of wearing the dress my mom saved for me at her own wedding because it'll save us so much money. My mom brought up the fact that she wasn't comfortable with that, since she was saving the dress for me. But Brad said my mom should agree, since she now has 2 wedding dresses, and I can wear the other one. Tessa also pointed out that the dress would need so many alterations to even fit me, since I'm much shorter than my mom and I'm not as thin as my mom. Tessa also said it would be years before I'd need it, so it wasn't going to be an issue. My mom was on the fence about it, but Brad was all for it and pulled the dress out of storage and handed it to Tessa. I freaked out and grabbed the dress out of her hands. I told her she wasn't allowed to wear my mom's dress, and that she can get her own mom's dress or buy her own, but she wasn't allowed to wear the dress my mom is saving for me. I locked myself and the dress in my room. All day, my mom has been texting me and coming to the door, asking me to come out and talk to her and Brad, who has been calling me spoiled and selfish, saying that I'm acting like a huge brat. I just can't let some stranger wear the only thing of my dad I have left. I feel bad. Tessa is really upset. She's been crying and texting me, asking me to apologize and give her the dress back. I can't tell if I'm in the wrong. Brad and Tessa think I'm being a jerk, but my stepbrother and friends agree that I should stand my ground. So, literally, the only people who think you're the jerk are the ones who try to steal the only thing you have left of your father? Then why is this even a question? Not the jerk, obviously. It's more subtle here than in most wedding stories on Reddit, but the stepdad here is definitely a member of the beloved Reddit trope of cartoon villains. He was so dedicated to stealing this dress from his stepdaughter that he just went and grabbed it out of storage mid-conversation instead of waiting until closer to the wedding. For the stepsister's part, she doesn't actually sound that bad. She might be a bit spoiled, but it's pretty obvious where she gets it from. My bigger problem with her is that her logic makes no sense. I don't know much about wedding dresses, so maybe someone in the comments can explain why the old dress would need to be altered, but the new one wouldn't. If the issue is that OP is shorter than her mom, I imagine that being an issue regardless of how old the dress is. Anyway, if anyone thinks Tessa and her dad somehow aren't the jerks here, feel free to share so in the comments. I can't imagine how anyone would make that argument, but I'm sure we'd all love to read it if you can. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.